Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I am Dr. Nalaja Green, and I am part of Emory University's MHTTC. I'm also an adjunct with Emory School of Public Health uh, and the founder of Standpoint Wellness, which is an integrated mental health practice here in Roswell, Georgia. We are continuing our conversation today on foundational aspects of cognitive behavioral therapy. Last week, we started with just kind of the fundamentals, talking about what automatic thoughts are, core beliefs, introducing unhelpful thinking patterns, giving you a sense of the cognitive therapy model. And today, we are continuing that conversation. Hopefully, you'll see some of those ideas kind of in practice, how they will work when we talk about depression. We are going to go over some statistics around depression, as well as listen to some experiences. If you have any questions or places where you're wondering about something, please don't hesitate to drop your questions in the chat. We are accompanied by Stephanie Tapscott, who keeps everything running, who has just dropped something into the chat to inform you that there is a resource page where there are recordings of the sessions in case you missed anything, as well as handouts. And Stephanie is also monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, she'll kind of jump in and let me know. So we are going to go ahead and get started. And I'll go over the agenda so you can just kind of know what to expect for today. And then we're going to head into a poll. So I'm just going to introduce how CBT conceptualizes depression. We're going to review the therapy session, the structure, and also talk about some measures that are often used. CBT takes objective measurement seriously. The idea is that as clients are learning skills, we'll be able to see measurable differences between from where they came in to where they end up. And we don't just restrict measurement to the beginning and the end of treatment. We like to measure all the way along so that if we have to make changes or pivot, we can go ahead and do that. And so we're going to talk a bit about measurement today because that is an important part of cognitive behavioral work. I'm also going to introduce tools for treating depression from a CBT framework specifically, talk about behavioral interventions, discuss some of the challenges with implementing CBT, and also we'll wrap it up with some conclusions and homework. So before we jump into that, I'd like to get a sense of what people are thinking about kind of in the room. And so we just have a short poll that Stephanie is going to pop on the screen, and you can just kind of scroll down because all of the questions are together. And so please go ahead and answer. All right. Okay. So most people think depression is neurochemical. All right, life experiences, how we think. So still we're heavy on depression is primarily a brain-based illness, but pretty significant contributor to how we think that contributes to depression, life experiences. And a small minority of us think it's about lacking appropriate coping skills. Okay. Depression is maintained by unhelpful thoughts and behaviors, most of us think, but some not accepting the present moment. Okay. Those folks, if you're not already doing kind of ACT, that might be something to kind of look into, that ACT agrees with you. Is changing thoughts enough? Yes, no, I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Yes, it looks like yes is winning out. That most people think if we change how we think about things, or if we help clients change how they think about things, then we can kind of help alleviate depression. All right, so this is kind of where we're starting. Let's see where we end up after we talk today. Some of CBT probably reinforces some of these ideas, and some might, some of what we talk about might challenge some of those ideas. So I like to kind of bring some other voices into the room. And so I thought we would start with a little bit of a story.
I used to be so depressed, man. Deep in my head, thinking about my life. I was 26, not making any real money. When everybody around me was doing way better, and I was working a fast food job. One day I had a bad shift that after work, I was angry. I was in my room just destroying everything. Like I was punching the walls. I broke my TV. I slammed my laptop. I was flipping out. But something in my spirit told me to call my homie Eldre. I guess I just needed somebody to talk to, so whatever. So I called him crying, like, bro, I can't take this shit anymore. I reached the lowest point in my life. I'm broke. I'm a loser or whatever, right? And the whole time I'm pouring my heart out, he wasn't saying anything. I mean, the phone was dead silent. It got to the point where after a moment, I had to check on him. I said, yo, are you still there? And after a moment, he says, you are a table. I said, what? He said, you are a table. I said, what do you mean? He told me this. He said, you are a table. Tomorrow you can be a chair, and the next day after that, you can be a lamp. Don't ever compare yourself or settle for what you can be. You have the power to decide who you are or what you are. And you can change your mind at any given moment. So today, you are a table. And then he just hangs up the phone. So I'm standing in my room, my knuckles bleeding. I'm like, what the hell? And at the time, that was like the dumbest thing I ever heard. But as that day went on, I just kept meditating on what he said. And those days turned to years, and it stuck with me ever since. That I am a table. Some days I'm the floor underneath, and other days I'm a chandelier, baby. Yeah. Yo.
Any thoughts about being a table? What does being a table have to do with depression and CBT? You can drop it in the chat. Folks can unmute. You are a table. The mind shift. I'm whatever I say I am. And this idea, right, of what you say you are, that has to do with self-talk. That's how has to do with how you're thinking about yourself, how you're thinking about who you are now and who you can be, right? One day I'm a table, the next day I'm a chair, I'm a chandelier, right? Something about stability, right? I am a table. I thought this was a kind of pretty accessible way of thinking about cognitions and how our cognitions impact our functioning, which is really one of the hallmark pieces of depression treatment in CBT. And so as we talk about and learn more about how CBT thinks about depression, keeping, right, this idea in mind about being a table or a chair or a chandelier and kind of what that means. So depression is pretty rampant in our society and actually worldwide. These statistics are from an NIH survey in 2021. About 21 million adults experienced a depressive episode in 2021. And we know that if someone experiences a major depressive episode once in life, they are more likely to experience more than a major depressive episode, which then gets them a diagnosis, a clinical diagnosis of major depressive disorder. The prevalence of major depression, or the prevalence of a major depressive episode was higher among females as compared to males, and also highest for those folks who are between the ages of 18 and 25. People who identify as having multiple races, they reported even higher episodes or instances of depressive episodes. You're really likely to run into depressed clients in 2021. About 61% of US adults 18 or older were living with a major depressive episode, and many of them received treatment in the past year. So, in many ways, that's good news, right? That folks are getting help for their suffering. But it also means that you're likely to see depressed clients, and CBT is one of the gold standard interventions that really has been well researched and shows a lot of promise for alleviating depressive symptoms, certainly in the short term. There's more discrepancies when we're looking at long term, but short term benefit, absolutely. CBT shows a lot of positive results. When we talk about depression and CBT, it's important to think about kind of the crux of how depression operates according to the cognitive behavioral framework and how it shows up. And so cognitive behavioral therapy says that at the core of depressive thought or depressive cognitions is a sense of biased thinking towards themselves, towards the future, and the world. I am worthless. I will never get better. Things will never get better. Nobody cares about me, and the future is bleak. This outlook isn't just about the present, right? It isn't just how I think about myself right now. It's also about how I color the past. And in our last session, we talked about mood state dependent emotions. And so essentially, if I am feeling happy right now, I am more likely to call up memories where I was feeling happy. If I'm feeling depressed or sad or worthless, I'm more likely to call up times when I felt depressed or sad or worthless. And so I might even paint my past as more negative than it actually was, because I already am operating from this negatively biased perspective. At the same time, I might look for confirmation in the environment around me that also supports the bias that I already have towards negative thinking. And so if you ask me how my day was, I'm much more likely to tell you about the things that went wrong, the things that were disappointing, the things that were upsetting, than I am to tell you about the experiences that were either neutral or in some ways positive. So when we think about being having a sense of worthlessness about oneself, really feeling like the world doesn't care and nothing is going to change, we really are paying attention to our clients thinking about and thought process, not just about their present, but also about their past and their future, and recognizing for them and helping them recognize for themselves that they are more likely to see all of their experiences through this particular lens. And so it's really important to be able to point that out earlier rather than later, because that really influences how you hear client stories and how clients are able to hear their own stories. The other thing that's important to think about here is that depression doesn't always look the same in everyone. Even though we have criteria for a major depressive disorder and a major depressive episode, some clients might lean more one way than another. For example, I work a lot with Black women, and many of my clients, even when they're experiencing depression, they come into the office or they show up virtually and their hair is done, their makeup is done, their clothes are pressed, they look neat, they look put together. And in fact, for some of them, the more depressed they feel, the more they look that way. And so it's important to recognize that people don't always look what you imagine a depressed person looks like. Sometimes, depending on cultural scripts and social norms, a person might overperform or overfunction rather than underfunctioning. They might present with more irritability, for example, than sad and depressed mood, especially if we're talking about gender differences, right? Men are often socialized to externalize their behaviors, where people assigned female at birth are often socialized to internalize their emotions and their experiences. And so, what might look like aggression, for example, in a person who is male identified, might be depression. But if you only look at the clinical criteria and don't also think about other kinds of factors, you might miss something. So really just paying attention to how, although we have one name, right, depression, we are actually talking about a collection of symptoms and experiences that can present differently depending on who is sitting in front of you. And so for me, it's really important to find out from my client, not only whether or not they fit a criteria, but asking them, what is the experience of depression or sadness look like for you? Really using their language. Oh, you said you've been feeling unmotivated. What does that look like? Or you said you had down times. Can you describe what a down day looks, right? Utilizing client language so you can have an understanding of their experience beyond a label. All right. So when we think about the therapeutic approach, I also want to talk about behavior. Cognitive behavioral therapy. So cognitions are an important part of depression treatment, but behavior is an important part too. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in depression. So I just wanted to say that before moving here. This is the general structure for therapy sessions. Cognitive behavioral therapy has a pretty structured approach to their sessions. You begin by setting the agenda, letting the client know what to expect. You do a check-in with the homework. Did you do the homework? What barriers came up to doing the homework? You have to make sure that you're checking in according to and related to the goals of the session. Not only the broader goals, but also figuring out what do you want to accomplish kind of in this meeting. In the beginning, when you're checking in, one of the things that you want to do is move beyond how are you doing today, but really use kind of objective measures to check in. And there are different ways of doing this, more and less complicated. Cognitive behavioral therapy likes objective measures. And so I wanted to just kind of introduce a few ways of thinking about and utilizing, bringing objective measures into the work that you're doing with clients. So the PHQ-9, are folks familiar with the PHQ-9? You can kind of raise your hand or put a little icon on your screen. Most people are. PHQ-9 is pretty popular in primary care settings. It's a depression screener. It's pretty kind of quick and dirty. It doesn't diagnose depression, but it does give you a sense of what clients are coming in with. And so generally speaking, the PHQ-9, I don't know, it takes about 5 or 6 minutes to complete. It's asking the client about their experience in the past 2 weeks. Number 9, it's a little bit cut off, but that's asking about thoughts that a person will be better off dead or self-harming thoughts. And the last question is asking about the level of difficulty that whatever they endorsed has been presenting to them. And so the PHQ-9, pretty easy. It's something that you can use just by itself, but it's also something that you can use alongside some other measures that you might be using. So for example, when I do trauma treatment, sometimes I'll use a PHQ-9 and also a PCL5 just to get an objective sense of where a client is when they are kind of coming in to session. And so that's kind of a quick and easy one to use before session starts. The SUD scale is something that is pretty popular in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the subjective units of distress, and it is a way for clients to quantify how distressed they feel in any given moment. Some people use a 0 to 100 scale. Some people use 1 to 10. I like 1 to 10. It's simpler for me and for my clients, but 0 to 100 is fine. And the idea is that you're helping clients gauge the intensity of their experience. Sometimes when clients are depressed, they might feel like they are depressed at the same level all day, no matter what they're doing, whether or not they were active that day or not active that day, if they stayed in bed all day or if they got up. And it can be really helpful to give clients the tools to be able to gauge their own level of mood and their own levels of distress. And so a client might come in and say, I've just been depressed all week and it's been the same level of depression. And then you ask them, okay, well, how depressed do you feel right now? On a scale of 0 to 100, like what's the level of your distress? I don't know, I'm at 100. Okay, so this is the worst that you've ever felt ever. There's never been a time where you felt more distress than this. Well, no, actually, I guess, when I got fired last month, like that was probably more distressing. Okay, so if that was at 100, where would you be today? All right, well then maybe I'm actually at a 70. Okay, so 70. So you are more than half level of distress that you normally feel. Well, actually, maybe I'm actually at a 60. I think I'm at a 60. Like I'm okay. I mean, I don't feel as good as I would like to feel, but I mean, I made a session today. right? Really helping clients understand their own level of distress. It really does make a difference. And also, it helps clients to know when they're feeling better, when they're feeling not so good, when they might need to add some other skills or activities kind of into their toolbox in order to kind of manage their mood differently. So the subjective units of distress is super helpful for using in session. I use this really kind of at the beginning of my sessions. I have all of my clients check in with their level of distress, and also I have them rate the level of intensity of particular emotions that they might be feeling. And so it really gives us a place to start. It allows clients to know what different emotions feel like, and also gives them the skills around managing their own intensity. You also can use this to help clients regulate their emotions so that if they come in at 40, for example, and you ask them, okay, so you're at a 40 today. What do you think could bring you to a 30? Right? Or what could happen in your life that would take you to a 50, right? You're helping clients also to understand the kind of triggers that might be external or internal that could make them feel more or less depressed. And so it's a really kind of simple, straightforward, and useful tool for helping clients manage their own emotions. The Burns Brief Mood Survey, this is actually a survey that can be used right before a session and right after session. It can be helpful, and sometimes as practitioners, we do this and sometimes we don't, but it can be helpful to get a sense of how a client is when they're coming in and how they are when they're leaving. And so the brief mood survey, it starts out just kind of asking about what you would imagine depressive feelings feel like, or a depressive episode includes. So that's depressed feelings, feeling sad or down, discouraged or hopeless, low self-esteem, questions about suicide, questions about anxiety, anger, but then there are also questions about happiness and relationship satisfaction. And the idea is that when a person comes in to session, you get a sense of where they are on these particular domains. You go ahead with treatment. And then at the end of session, you get a sense of where they are on these particular domains. So that can be a really good way of assessing how the session went, and also providing an opportunity to begin with next session, right? So last session, I noticed that when we started, you were feeling pretty depressed, not very suicidal, but pretty anxious, kind of angry, a very little bit of happiness, and kind of moderate relationship satisfaction. And by the end, after we had talked about some skills and you felt more empowered, most of those scores changed. But what didn't change was the relationship satisfaction. So I wanted to kind of follow up on that this week about and talk more about that, right? So you can use this survey also not only as a place for information about that present session, but also as a jumping off point for the following sessions. So this is a an example of a factor analysis of the BDI. The BDI is the Beck Depression Inventory. This is kind of the second version of it. It really is kind of a gold standard tool that is used to assess depressive symptoms specifically. And you also, at the end of the measure, you have your ranges to let you know, and your cutoff scores to let you know whether or not a person would qualify for experiencing a major depressive episode or not. This, of course, is not the measure itself, but this is a breakdown of the particular factors that are being measured. And I thought that it was a really good example of the different aspects of life that are being impacted by depression within the person. And so Beck says that we're looking at depression at the cognitive level, the affective level, and the somatic level. And so when we are providing these measures to our clients, it's important that we're touching on the cognitive, what are they thinking about, the affective, what are they feeling, and what's happening in their bodies, because depression is a multifactorial experience. At the cognitive level, the Beck Depression Inventory asks about difficulty making decisions, a sense of failure, devaluing oneself, feelings of guilt, punishment, feeling uncomfortable with oneself, dissatisfied with oneself, and feeling very critical. At the level of emotions, sadness, pessimism, loss of pleasure, suicidal thoughts, lack of interest, energy, and irritability. And at the somatic level, we are measuring concentration, tiredness, or fatigue, a sense of loss, agitation, changes in sleeping habits, appetite, and also loss of sexual interests. Changes in appetite can also translate to changes in weight. And so that's an important thing to figure out with clients. Sometimes clients gain or lose more weight than you might imagine, or that more weight than they should within a certain period of time. So I like to ask clients if they've noticed any changes in their weight and if they were intentionally trying to lose or gain weight within a certain period of time. Usually I'll say within the last 3 months. And clients generally are able to say, well, actually, yeah, I gained 15 pounds over the last 3 months, which is substantial, right? Or I lost 15 pounds over the last 3 months, which is substantial, especially if someone is not trying to gain or lose weight. And so that also can be an opening to finding out more about eating habits, and if there might be some disordered eating that's also at play here. So the Beck Depression Inventory, it's a pretty comprehensive inventory when it comes to depressive symptoms, and these are kind of the underlying factors. Any questions so far about kind of measurement? Or comments about measurement? Do you see anything in the chat, Stephanie? No? Okay. All right. And again, measurement can be as complicated or as simple as time allows. Some folks might have 30-minute sessions or 45-minute sessions. Doing a bunch of measures might take too long. The Beck Depression Inventory is 20 some odd questions. It might be better to just check in with kind of a SUDS, right? Or to do the PHQ-9. So you can kind of really think about what fits your environment, what fits your style, and what fits your clients. And so I wanted to just kind of review or reintroduce the kind of general model that we're working with, where cognitive behavioral therapy says, okay, most situations are neutral. Thoughts and cognitions get in the way or mediate our experience of situations, and they contribute to our emotions and also physical symptoms or sensations, which then impact behaviors. But we also know that as human beings, we actually register emotions before we register thoughts. So usually, while the situation might be neutral, we feel something about it, and then the thoughts come in later, where we're telling ourselves a story about what our feelings are and what our feelings mean, which is why context matters so much when we are talking about how clients are thinking about their emotions in relationship to particular experiences. And so one of the tools that we use when we are working with thoughts is cognitive restructuring, and we'll get to cognitive restructuring in just a moment. But usually when a depressed client comes in to a CBT therapist, after they do an evaluation, after they do a screening, they move into behavioral activation. And behavioral activation is really where you're getting clients to move. Remember, depression is a multifactorial experience. You have the cognitive level, the affective level, and the somatic level. So behavioral activation is kind of starting at the somatic level. It's starting at the level of the body. And when you start at the level of the body, it impacts your mood, and it also impacts the thought level. And so behavioral activation is really about getting clients moving before they feel like it, right? We're not waiting for clients to feel motivated in order to get them active. The motivation comes as the activity happens. And so the goals of behavioral activation is to get a sense of the client's current activity levels. Also, you want to encourage clients to re-engage in life, even if they don't enjoy the same activities that they used to enjoy. You still want to encourage them to give it a try. You want them to do more of what counteracts depression. And depression, excuse me. Okay, the sneeze didn't happen. The sneeze might happen, so we'll see. Depression often tells clients that it's better for them to stay inside, stay in bed, not do anything. And so I often have to talk to clients about kind of the depressive voice and ask them whether or not that's a trustworthy voice. Ask them to look at the evidence that they have of what has happened and how they felt when they followed that voice versus what happens when they have done the opposite of what that voice is telling them to do. So if you have the opportunity to go to brunch with a friend on Sunday, and your depression is kind of telling you, you know what, you just want to stay on the couch all day and watch Netflix. Let's think about the last time you did that. The last time you stayed on the couch all day and watched Netflix. How did you feel after the 8th episode of the show that you have been watching versus how do you feel when you actually spend time with people that you care about? Through activity scheduling, which is the major intervention with behavioral activation, clients can learn more about the ebbs and flows of their depressive feelings and the relationship of these depressive feelings to activity levels. So again, when a client comes in, they might tell you, I'm depressed and I'm the same level of depressed all day. But when you have clients do activity scheduling, you're having them chart not only their actions and their activities, but you're also having them rate their mood throughout the day. And so clients are really able to see how their mood changes and shifts on those days when they're active, on those days when they're not, on those days when they're doing more activities that they have a sense of mastery over, versus the days when they're lying on the couch all day watching Netflix. You want to counteract the depressive tendency to withdraw from life. We know that withdrawal and isolation is not helpful for depression. You want to purposely schedule activities that involve pleasure, mastery, and social interaction. These are the three essential components of well-being, right? According to this framework, that people are engaged in activities that bring them pleasure. I also say in activities that might bring them a sense of peace or fulfillment, because sometimes we do things that bring us joy. Sometimes we do things that may not bring us joy per se, but we have a sense of peace, and that also contributes to well-being. So I add peace and fulfillment to that pleasure piece. You want clients to do things that they feel a sense of achievement or accomplishment. Remember, one of the hallmark cognitions in depression is I'm worthless, right? I have no purpose. I am useless. When you encourage clients to actually do things where they have a sense of accomplishment, that directly counteracts that message of worthlessness. And social interaction. Nobody cares. Nobody likes me. Nobody wants me around. Social interaction directly counteracts that, because maybe everyone doesn't like you, but there are people in the world that you can find connection with. Pleasure, mastery, social interaction. It's really important that those three components of well-being are a part of the kinds of activities that we're scheduling with clients. Behavioral activation also calls up a client's ability to problem solve, to overcome obstacles to engaging. And you also want to help clients create behaviors that are self-reinforcing. Again, I might not feel like getting up to go to the group exercise class, but once I get in the room and the instructor's kind of funny and the music is kind of good, and actually there's that person up at the front who I admire, and this person over here, we actually had a conversation last time about this restaurant that we like. And so the activity itself becomes reinforcing once I'm engaged in the activity. How do you do activity scheduling? Well, you use a form like this. This, I think, is a little bit ambitious because there's not a lot of space for and jotting down a client's experience. But as you can see over here, you have the time. It starts at 5 a.m. all the way to 8 p.m. On the one side, a client is meant to write what they did, right? So I brushed my teeth, I took a shower, I ate breakfast, I sent a couple of emails, I watched a movie, right? They're writing that over here. And over here, they're rating their mood, right? So if you use a SUD scale, 0 to 100, when I was brushing my teeth, I don't know, my mood, I didn't feel a lot of distress. I was probably at a 20, right? And then when I was sending some emails, I felt a little bit more anxious, a little bit more distressed. And so that was maybe like at a 40, right? And then I was watching a movie and that was kind of funny. So I probably had no distress. I was at a 10, right? So you're helping clients to really look at the relationship between the activities that they're doing and their levels of distress. Also, though, with most activity schedules, you also want a place for like levels of mastery. And so that's not a part of this schedule, but there are many other schedules out there that do have that. So you want to include that. But this is the main tool that you'll use when you are scheduling activities with clients. And there is a way to think about activity scheduling. And here are some concepts that we can keep in mind when we are engaging in behavioral activation with clients. So I'm going to go down the list, and then I'm going to come back and highlight at least the self-talk piece, because I have a separate slide for that. Action precedes motivation. We are not waiting until clients feel like doing it. We are helping them to chart activities before they feel like it, and trusting that the activities themselves will be reinforcing. And so what I like to do with clients is I like to ask for like the big goal and then the smaller goals. So if we are meeting on a Monday and I'm asking them, okay, well, what's the big goal for the week? If we wanted to get you active and you were able to do something, can we pick something that you feel able to do? Maybe you used to go to the gym 3 times a week and you would stay there for an hour. That might not feel like something you can do right now. What feels like something you can do? Okay, well, I mean, I think I can maybe go for a walk 4 times a week and I can do that for 30 minutes. Okay, so let's say that's the big goal, 4 times a week for 30 minutes. Let's say that that feels really difficult. What's the minimum? What is the smallest thing that you can commit to, even if it's not that big goal? Okay, well, I know for sure that I like to drink coffee, and the coffee shop is only about 10 minutes away. And I drink coffee about 3 times a week. So I know for sure I can walk for 10 minutes to the coffee shop. Okay, so let's make that the minimum goal and the other goal, the big goal. So I like to give clients the opportunity to have kind of a goal range, if you will, that even if they don't make the ideal, we still have a minimum that they can reach towards. And in the hope is that in doing the minimum, they'll see that maybe they can do more than they thought and we can get to the ideal. And so really helping clients have a range and really helping them choose the thing that they're going to do. Success is in the effort and it's not about the outcome. So whether or not the client goes to the coffee shop 3 times a week or only goes twice, whether they don't actually walk for 10 minutes, but they walk for less, we want to applaud, reinforce the fact that the client is trying, the fact that the client is really kind of giving all of their effort to doing whatever the thing is that they have set out to do. You want to establish a goal and a rationale. So it isn't just let's go to the coffee shop 3 times a week, but it's why are we going to the coffee shop 3 times a week? Why is that important? Well, we're going to the coffee shop 3 times a week because eventually you would like to go back to the gym. You would like to get comfortable around people again. And so the coffee shop is a relatively low risk way of getting some activity in, doing something that you like to do, which is having coffee, and also having social interaction, right? When you're there, you might be able to greet the barista, you might be able to talk to the people that are in line and just kind of exchange pleasantries. It's a way of helping the person reconnect to something that might actually be a larger goal in a low risk kind of way. Plan and schedule. Plan and schedule, plan and schedule. Sometimes people say things like, I'll do it, right? It's like if you run into someone and both of you are talking and that person says, you know what, we should get dinner sometime. And you say, yeah, we should get dinner sometime. How likely are you to get dinner? I know in my life, unless it's on my one of the 4 calendars I have, I'm not likely to do it. Dinner sometime might mean dinner sometime this year or maybe even next year. And so we want to think about that with clients. Plan and schedule. Instead of let's get dinner sometime, when are you going to get dinner? Are you likely to get dinner on Saturday or Sunday or maybe Wednesday's better for you? Okay, and is dinner for you at like 5 o'clock or is dinner at like 7 o'clock? Okay, what makes it more likely that you are going to actually schedule dinner? Do you need to be at a restaurant that's closer to home or further away? Who would you invite to dinner or would you go by yourself? Sometimes I'll actually have clients schedule activities while we're in session. And so we'll talk about them doing something and I will say, okay, let's put that on your calendar, right? Or let's send that text message now so that it's not a I'll do it later, it's that we're doing it right now. Self-talk. We're going to talk about changing give up thoughts to go to thoughts in just a moment. But self-talk is really important because you can do all of 1 through 4, but then if a person says, oh, but I can't do it, or oh, I'll do it later, or oh, what's the point? Then unless we have a way of tackling and challenging those thoughts, that person might not do any of the things that you have planned. Take credit. Really encourage clients to take credit for the fact that they show up, for the fact that they're trying, for the fact that they're even thinking about doing things that make them uncomfortable. Take credit. Taking credit is in and of itself rewarding and reinforcing, which really kind of goes to number 7, rewards. We want the rewards to be not only external, but also internal. And so the example of going to the coffee shop, maybe I really like coffee. And so an external reward might be, okay, I get coffee. But the internal sense of accomplishment, the internal sense of satisfaction, the ability to have a moment of social connection, those internal rewards are longer lasting than that cup of coffee. And then putting it all together is kind of what it sounds like, right? You kind of put the plan all together, problem solving, the go-to thoughts, ways that a client can reward themselves, helping them to take credit even as you're going through the process of planning. That's the kind of putting it all together piece. So what do we mean by give up thoughts and go-to thoughts? And here I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of thinking. Give up thoughts are thoughts that are kind of classic depression thoughts. I can't do it. I'll do it later. It's not going to help. I've tried everything. No one's going to come with me if I invite them. All of these thoughts that are reinforcing the sense that I'm worthless, that nothing's ever going to get better, and people don't care about me. And so instead of helping a client stay with the thought, I'll do it later, you can help a client think about, well, what happens if you do it later? Well, if I put it off, I'm actually less likely to do it at all. Later means never. So we've moved from the give up thoughts, like what's the use, to the go-to thought. Perhaps this other thought, the go-to thought, is actually more helpful and is more likely to lead to action than the give up thought, I'll do it later. The give up thought, it's not going to help. The go-to version of that is just because I don't feel like doing something doesn't mean I can't do it. I can do things that I don't want to do, right? It's not going to help. Okay, maybe that's a thought I'm having, but I don't really know that that's true without trying. I can't do this. Telling myself I can't do something makes it harder for me to even try. I've done many things I thought I could not do. So we're not looking at the give up thought and calling it false. We're not looking at the give up thought and just saying, instead of I'll do it later, you can do anything now, right? We're not just kind of creating a positive affirmation. We are taking the give up thought and we're kind of expanding the information around the give up thought. And so I thought we would kind of try our hands at it. And I'd like you to drop your response in the chat. So I'd rather take a nap. No, sorry, I am too tired. What is the go-to thought for I am too tired? So you're talking to your client who's feeling depressed, and the thought is, I am too tired. What might be a go-to thought instead? Now I'm just going to stop sharing so I can see the chat. Any ideas? So you go through all of the trouble of planning. I'm really tired, but I feel better if I at least started. Yep, that's a great one. Other ideas? My client says, yeah, that sounds great, Dr. Green, but you know what? I'm just really tired. Okay, well, here's another one. I'd rather take a nap, which is kind of like I'm really tired. I'd rather take a nap. I mean, I could go to the park, but I'd rather just take a nap. What could you help the client think instead? How could you restructure? Will that move me forward? Okay. So if I take a nap, will that move me closer to my goal? You might ask, okay, well, what happened the last time you took a nap? Well, the last time I took a nap, I thought I was going to be asleep for an hour, but I actually ended up sleeping the day away and I didn't do anything active. Okay, and what about the give up thought? I have already tried everything and nothing works. So yeah, I mean, I'll do this activity scheduling thing that you're talking about, but I've already tried everything and nothing really works anyway. What would you say to a client who says that to you? Do not map the future. Every day is a new day with different opportunities and circumstances. What did you try? Absolutely. Whenever a client says to me, I've already tried everything, my first question is, okay, what did you try? And more often than not, they've tried 5 or 6 things. Deep breathing is usually one of them, right? I've tried the apps. Tell me about what you've tried so far. Absolutely. Absolutely. right? Helping the client to expand what they're already thinking so that they can pull in some other pieces of information, right? I've already tried, they probably have already tried. And maybe they have tried that, they have felt like they've tried everything, but you know that they haven't. And so looping in, okay, I hear that you've tried. Tell me what you've tried. Okay, so you've tried these things. Well, what about these things? Okay, so maybe I've tried many things, but I actually haven't tried everything, right? So we've gone from a give up thought to a go-to thought. We've gotten some more information for let us do, for allowing us to get there. All right, good. Okay. So what we are moving into and talking about is cognitive restructuring. Cognitive restructuring involves looking at automatic thoughts using the downward arrow technique, which we talked about last time, as well as Socratic questioning. This is where the thinking errors and unhelpful thinking patterns identification really comes in. And this is where we're really using a thought record. And so this is just a replication of the slide I showed you before about how to help clients identify automatic thoughts, right? What's going through my mind? What am I not thinking? What does the situation mean to me? Am I making a prediction or remembering something? And so I thought that we would also spend some time practicing on our own, utilizing a recent situation. And so I think we have enough time to break into smaller groups, Stephanie. And so we're going to break into smaller groups and we will have about 5 or 6 minutes to work. And I'd like you as a group to choose a situation, if someone who is comfortable picking a situation that happened in their lives and kind of working through this worksheet together. So I might, in my group, say, well, recently I had a distressing phone call from my aunt. And so if we have a person who is kind of the supposed client, if we have a person who is the supposed therapist, and then the observer. So let's do 3 people per group, Stephanie. And the person who is the client, you will give your situation. Let it not be too distressing, a suds of 50 or below. The practitioner or the provider, you will go through the thought record with that person. And then the observer, you will observe the process. So let's break into groups and give us maybe about 5 minutes to practice. And we're going to use this thought record. All right, welcome back, everyone. It was nice to see faces for a moment. So thank you for kind of coming on camera for a bit. Any reactions to that exercise? Any quick observations? It was helpful. Or questions about it? I think CBT offers some really helpful techniques that on the surface can seem pretty simple. When we go into it though, and we utilize ourselves, I think we can see how, even though we might have the tools for shifting our thinking, it's not always easy to do that. It's not always easy to let go of things that we might believe. Even if we're able to see this belief might not be that helpful, when we have the chance to step back and challenge that belief, or someone is guiding us in that process, then we really can learn how it can feel for a client to be in the position where they're having their thoughts challenged. They may have been thinking this way for a very long time, and you are offering a different perspective. And so being able to do that in a way that is respectful of the fact that the client may be thinking this way and has been thinking this way for a long time, can really allow the session to move forward more smoothly and make it more likely that the client will be able to shift how they're thinking. The other thing is they may not shift how they're thinking in that moment, and that's okay, because you can just use that moment as one of many. So you're kind of planting seeds there, right? And after the first session, they still might think the same thing. And so you can use that in the next session and just understand that you are helping the client to move closer and closer to a more helpful way of thinking, rather than assuming, well, at the end of one thought record, we have to be at the place where I don't believe that thought anymore. My emotions are totally different than what they were. And now I'm kind of ready to shift my unhelpful thinking patterns. It might not go that way, and that's okay. Yes, we have to be understanding as relates to our clients. Absolutely. Right. Empathy is always a tool in the room. So, all right. So as we are kind of moving to the end of our session, I want to kind of continue to talk about this thing of empathy and understanding. And so I want to introduce the responsibility pie chart, and then we're going to talk a little bit about context. In addition to unhelpful thinking patterns, automatic thoughts, and core beliefs, clients may also be walking around with a sense of responsibility that is out of proportion to what they actually did or did not do. And so the responsibility pie chart is a really helpful tool for helping clients identify the ways in which they might be taking responsibility for things that might not be theirs to take responsibility for, or the ways in which they might be taking disproportionate amounts of responsibility for an action that happened, for example. There are many outcomes that lead to any given action in the world, and sometimes depressed clients only see their part, and they see their part through the lens of negativity. When you use a pie chart example, it can really give a client a visual and allow them to say, wait a minute, do I have 100% responsibility for this thing, whatever this thing is? Or actually, does it make sense for me to have 50% or 20%? Or maybe I am completely responsible, but at least allowing the thought process really can help clients be critical of their own self-narratives, right? And that can really aid in restructuring. So I also wanted to talk about context. When we talk about behavioral activation, when we talk about cognitive restructuring, we can talk about it in kind of a siloed fashion, where it's all about, well, is a client changing the way they think? And if they're not changing the way they think, then we just need to hammer harder on the client's belief system. Or if a client isn't doing what we ask them to do, then maybe they're just not motivated enough, and it's all about them getting enough motivation to go out and do the thing. But what we really need to pay attention to is how the social determinants of health are really also a part of client functioning. So maybe as a part of my behavioral activation plan, I say, okay, well, you have sidewalks in your neighborhood. I encourage you to take a 20-minute walk every day. You know, it's really hot in Georgia right now. So let's wait until kind of it's later in the evening, maybe about 7, 8 o'clock, take a walk. Now, if the client lives in an unsafe environment, it actually may not be very feasible or safe for them to take a walk at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. If they live in an environment that might have sidewalks, but people are still kind of speeding down the road, or visibility is bad, or drivers aren't attentive to like the stop signs, for example, then it might not be, it might be actually more hazardous. If they live in a space that doesn't have green spaces, then they may not have the opportunity to go and just like sit on a bench and spend time in a park. So really thinking about what are the environments in which our clients are living in? What access do they have to particular physical resources as well as other resources like fresh food options? If we want them to change how they're navigating the world, if we want them to change what they put in their bodies, for example, do they have access to food that is fresh and healthy for them? What about access to healthcare systems? Sometimes depressed clients haven't really taken care of themselves, and so they haven't gone to doctor's appointments, dentist appointments. Are they living in environments and in communities where they can access healthcare providers who are empathic, who are understanding, who are respectful, who are trustworthy? Are we talking about people who are living in communities that are plagued with violence from community members, from outsiders, from police? Are we talking about people who live in safer communities in that way? Do our clients have access to jobs that pay livable wages that would alleviate kind of constant financial stress that they may be living under, which can contribute to depressive symptoms? Really beginning to think about our clients from an environmental and a social perspective, and understanding that when we talk about feelings of worthlessness and thoughts of worthlessness, when we talk about nobody cares about me and the world is forever going to be terrible, we aren't just talking about a client's intrapsychic process. We may also be talking about messages that they've received directly or indirectly from their social environment, right? From the cultural scripts that they may be navigating. I'm noticing that it's 101. So we are 1 minute behind. Apologies, but I wanted to at least begin the conversation around the environment and how that impacts individual mental health and well-being. This is a part of the handouts that you'll see, so you can kind of look a little bit more into the social determinants of health. I'm sure there are options in the resource pages. Thank you so much for sharing this lunch hour with me. Hopefully, you have learned a tool. We will see each other next week. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and watch the replay if you kind of have questions, or send Stephanie questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you so much, everyone. Apologies for being 1 minute over time. Bye.